Hello there. My name is Greg Howard, and I'm broadcasting to you from the sound booth here at Building 2 Studios. It's not much in the way of decor. I apologize. We hadn't figured on doing any kind of a video recording here. This was entirely for music, but you know what? It still works. At any rate, what I'm talking to you about is I-1639 here in Washington State, and how our governor, Jay Inslee, and our attorney general, Bob Ferguson, are trying to lecture a lot of us about how for anyone to try to interpret this law is inappropriate. Uh, Essentially, what's going on is that the majority of the counties, the majority of the sheriffs in Washington State have openly stated they're not going to enforce this law. Why not? It's unconstitutional. It's not hard to figure out. Let's say the sheriffs, do not have the right to think they are mini Supreme Courts. This is Bob Ferguson's own words. There's a problem here. There's a real problem here. The idea behind it, or at least the purported idea behind it, is to reduce the number of crimes done by assault rifles. Well, first of all, the rifles that they're talking about here are not assault rifles. Secondly, I think there was one long-arm murder in all of 2017. I don't have the figures for 2018. The use of assault rifles as a criminal weapon of choice, that's kind of rare here in Washington State. However, that doesn't alter the fact that Jay Inslee and Bob Ferguson are at war with assault rifles. Okay. Their definition of an assault rifle is any semi-automatic rifle, regardless of anything else. God in heaven, the 1022 Ruger, a rimfire squirrel gun, is an assault rifle, according to this law. I kid you not. I'm not joking. You can't make this stuff up. No, an assault rifle. Okay. A caliber between that of a common handgun and a common rifle. I know that's a little broad, but there it is. All right. Easily field strippable, requiring little or no tools. Fires off a detachable box magazine. 3 selectable fire. In other words, it has the capacity for full auto. That's already illegal in Washington State. Washington State is not a Class 3 state. You cannot own a fully automatic weapon in Washington State unless you're law enforcement. All right? So why are they even worried about this? This isn't about crime control. This is about control, pure and simple. Thomas Jefferson said it best: the finest assurance against a corrupt government is an armed populace. Let that sink in. Okay, so why are we even worried about owning semi-automatic rifles? This isn't about hunting deer. The dang nation. I lost my bookmark. Here we are. Not hard to find. To understand our right to own firearms, you have to understand the Second Amendment. To understand the Second Amendment, you have to understand its heritage. All right? Before we wrote the Constitution, before that was presented, our ancestors decided first they needed to divorce themselves from the rule of King George III. They did this with a document that we celebrate every 4th of July. I'm going to read to you the second paragraph, a little wordy, but it's fairly essential if you're going to understand why we have the right to own firearms. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Endowed by their Creator. In other words, the rights aren't given to you by the government. They are recognized. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed. Consent can be revoked, can't it? That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them that seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Hard to do that when you're only armed with pitchforks and torches, isn't it? Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That wasn't written in legalese, was it? That was written in the common vernacular of the day. So, in other words, if you want to understand the Declaration of Independence, or for that matter, the Constitution, you don't need a lawyer. You need somebody who's had at least bonehead English 101 in college and has studied a little bit of history. So, the Declaration of Independence declares that we have the right, we have the duty to throw a despotic government out. Can't do that unless you are armed. Can't do that unless you have firearm capacity on par with those with whom you will be doing battle. Pure and simple. All right. Here we are. Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia. What's a militia? Seriously, what's a militia? It's not the National Guard. At the time that this was written, a militia was every able-bodied man between the age of 21 and 45. Why 21 to 45? Because they figured, yeah, people die shortly after 45, and they're probably not going to be very able-bodied after that. Well, age band has increased. So essentially, any able-bodied person, women are now included as citizens. That was not the case in 17 or 18, whenever this was written. Criminy. I don't have the date here, and I forgot it. My apologies. Regardless, a well-regulated militia, which is essentially any capable citizen of age, being necessary to the security of a free state. Security, protection from harm, protection from being overrun, protection from crime, protection from whatever. Of a free state, a group of people, essentially your neighborhood, your borough, your county, your district, your town, whatever. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. This is the explanation. This is why we have the Second Amendment. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. Nowhere else in the Constitution do you see those four words together. Shall not be infringed. If we took a fraction of the requirements necessary to purchase a firearm in this country and applied them to voting, well, first of all, Alexandria occasionally cognizant would not be in office, but secondly, you would have a hue and cry from the left. The idea of trying to have voter ID during an election is so repugnant to them. Why? Well, it's hard to stuff a ballot box with false votes when you have somebody checking up and keeping people accountable. After all, you need ID to get a driver's license. You need ID to catch a check. You need ID to apply for food stamps. You need ID to do just about anything in this country. Why is it is racist to require ID to vote? But you have to provide ID and a background check and all kinds of other good stuff, and then wait for a period of time before you can own a firearm. Doesn't make any grand amount of sense. But there it is. Shall not be infringed. The state of Washington, in their constitution, uses the language shall not be impaired. But I-1639 is going to require safety courses to acquire ownership of a weapon. There will be more investigation. There's going to be a ban on how big of a magazine you can own. A piece of stamped steel with spring steel, piano wire, and a piece of plastic is going to suddenly become a felony if it holds more than 10 rounds. Really? We tried restrictions like that on alcohol, and it didn't work. And that's not even a guaranteed right in the Constitution. All that did was give us organized crime. No. This goes back to what Jefferson said. The finest assurance against a corrupt government is an armed populace. Now, you'll notice that the same people who are screaming for gun control are also trying to steer us into socialism. It's not an accident. Socialism has never been inflicted upon an armed population. They disarmed the people first. Then they created their socialistic utopia. Then the next thing you know, you have people hemorrhaging out of it, trying to get away from the hellhole that it's turned into. I thought I had escaped from this when I left the People's Soviet Socialist Republic of California. Seems like it followed me up here. I didn't bring it with me, I assure you. I'm not running from it this time. I'm standing my ground. I-1639 is unconstitutional and is illegal. And you don't have to be an attorney to understand it. Thank you very much for your time.